So, within the genre of horror, what could be more horrific and or disturbing? How about a reboot? Yeah, well. So, in horror news, somewhat, it's very brief, but nevertheless, I take an interest in it. About a week ago, on Twitter, this guy named Jeff Snyder, I'm assuming Snyder, and writes for theankler.com, none of which I'd ever heard of, but apparently it's an insider industry type blog or what have you. And his tweet was very brief. It says he says exclusive, so he apparently got this tip from those in the know. And he says, start prepping those pitches, genre scribes, because it sounds like Lionsgate is ready to venture back into the woods again for another Blair Witch project, since good IP is never truly dead in the streaming age. Well, is it still a good IP? For some, it never was. For me, it was. I went into it hard and deep and loved the whole idea. And all of that, because it was much more than just found footage. They established this whole backstory through and utilized the internet. This is one of the first film projects that really hit hard on that and developed this whole fake folklore myth about Blair Witch. And he had all these details and did a lot of work on that, probably more than the film itself. And then there was this Sci-Fi Channel special that was more of your faux documentary type thing on what this event entailed, and all of that combined, I think, made the movie a better experience, and that's how I approached it. But for a lot of people, it's one of those, Blair Witch is one of those things where you either liked it or you hated it. And a lot of people were just, this is cheap shit, and that was it. They bailed immediately. And it's also one of those things where maybe in the found footage genre in total, there are people who just are never going to accept that. They do not like that. And that's just the way it is. And that could be true of a lot of different genres and whatnot, but certainly in this instance specifically, if it's already rubbing you the wrong way, there's no way any found footage film can draw you in, because it's basically that. The rules that are not always followed by these films, to their detriment, is you've got to explain how and why the camera keeps rolling. Sometimes it could just be like in Paranormal Activity, they did this very well, and in quite a few where it was security cameras and that sort of thing. So that explains it. But when you've got like a Cloverfield, after a while, it's like that guy's not going to keep holding that camera. In Blair Witch, you could argue that, but they even go into it and explain it about how there was this sort of psychological security blanket within it because of their panic and fear. And one of the characters even explains it is like this keeps it's like you're only watching it through the camera. You're not a part of it. And so that was pretty good in it. The shaky cam and stuff, but that's part of the reality of it. And I've often explained that, I guess, because I was a sucker for found footage, and I am, admittedly, because I've seen a buttload of them, and there's more bad than good. A lot of them are just not that good. Some of them kind of hit on it and do some good stuff here and there, but others they fall flat, and when they fall flat, it's awful. And some of them are some of the more cheaper ones actually were pretty good, because it shouldn't require a whole lot of money. I mean, Cloverfield, of course, the special effects, you're going to have a Godzilla type creature in it, that sort of thing. You can understand the money there. But others, it's like they spend a lot of, like the recent Paranormal Activity reboot they just did on Paramount Plus, PP as I call it, was terrible. It was shot well. It was the greatest shot film, but and some things were creepy and interesting about it. But then they violate their own found footage rules in it and stuff. And I just, oh God, who cares? So not worth trouble. Blair Witch. So it hit big with that, and of course for film studios and whatnot was how cheaply made it was. Oh man, this would be something, and that sort of thing. But it was very clever with their campaign on how to promote it, with creating this. You really need this folklore backdrop to it, And it puts you into this position of there's always been these shows and documentaries about folklore, Bigfoot, and stuff like that, UFOs and whatever. And sometimes they would send people out into the woods and nothing really happens. They hear weird noises or whatever. And then the ghost hunting shows and stuff like that. But what if something actually happened and you caught it on camera? And so that was kind of the pull on it. And so they set up this whole thing for it. They even, the producer or the directors of it, they admitted that they were inspired by the old In Search Of show that, Leonard Nimoy used to narrate. And so that's the thing. It would talk about these weird stories, but if you actually caught the weird thing on camera, that would be really spectacular. And that was the concept of it. And so it kind of reminded me of my lifelong obsession with Orson Welles' War of the Worlds thing, where you're using the aspects of reality, in that case, a radio news program, to tell the narrative of your horror story or whatever it could be. And that's recognizable to you because you watch the news or something like that. And so in this case with found footage, it posits this, well, they found this footage and nobody knows what happened to these people. This is what is on it, and what do you think happened, and that sort of thing. And that was fine, left to itself. As to be a franchise to build on, wasn't so certain about that, and so far it just hasn't happened. Paranormal Activity managed to make it happen, but it kind of fizzled when they seemed to abandon their own narratives that they appeared to be developing within the storyline, and it kind of went haywire and got lost. The reboot is just starting over with something else, but they didn't start over very well in that. As for Blair Witch, the second film, Book of Shadows, was interesting. It's just a classic horror film in that it's not a found footage thing or anything like that, but it's within the same world. And there again, they did do a sci-fi TV special on the side of that, which had used different actors as the real people involved in it. And that was pretty cool. But the movie's okay. It's not a great horror film, but it's just sort of all right. But it just didn't have the gravitas and impact of the original film. And so after that, it faded and died, and no one quite knew what to do. And Paranormal Activity really took over the genre. There were other films. There's plenty of them. People still make them to this day. But I think that genre of horror faded in favor of stuff like Conjuring and stuff like that as far as horror films go. But they made another attempt with another Blair Witch movie, and so like a sucker, I fell for it. And there were some interesting things to it. The cast was terrible. I'm sorry. The acting was not very good. And there were some interesting things to it, though. It suggested like there were certain anomalies with the woods themselves, like time displacement and stuff like that. Even though it also, you see a creature. It's brief, but there's some sort of monster there, whether it's the Blair Witch herself or something else, and they had all kind of fan theories about what it could be. And all that's interesting and stuff, but it just didn't deliver well at all. Despite the fact that they had all this new technology about to capture more scenes and whatnot. But that's another aspect. I don't think they would have held on to the camera as long as they did. But so it suggested some interesting things, but the delivery just wasn't all that great. So I don't know what metrics they're going by. Are they just like, what do we got? We got to put something out. And they say, well, we own the rights to this. That was a brand of some sort. So would another Blair Witch film or a reboot in total go well? I rather doubt it. Unless they've got some clever guy who has another bent on found footage approach and could do it and just do it under the Blair Witch banner. And goes back and looks at the original and some of the story ideas. There's all kinds of things you could go into about it. But, of course I'll watch it. But that's just a basic little recap on the whole Blair Witch thing from my perspective. And so I'm rather dubious that there's anything good to do. I'm more of the opinion now that it's just a one and done thing and should be left alone. And the other people picked up the mantle of found footage and did some good stuff and cool stuff, and others not so much. But nevertheless, that's probably the better approach for that, and try to come up with some other idea for the found footage genre. Yeah, but looks like they're going to go through for another one, and it can't possibly be as bad as that last Blair Witch movie, but then again, they might just say, hold my beer. But, I guess we'll see for those who care to.